Castillo, Manuel Castillo. Yes. Yes. Marquez, yes. Rubik, yes. Pay, yes. Steen, yes. Hernandez, yes. Yes. Del Carmen. Okay, so we're just missing one person. All right. I put this PowerPoint up on Blackboard, so you should have access to it. You should have access to it, so you can print it out and maybe use it to write notes on. Hopefully you've seen it already, but anyways, I put it this afternoon. I apologize. It takes me longer because I'm working on the notes that I'm going to be using, and then I transfer the notes over to the PowerPoint. So sometimes I'm still working on the PowerPoint till the end. So I apologize for that, but it is there on Blackboard. I've been thinking about paper number 3, and I'm not sure if I want to eliminate it or not, or if I wanted to turn it. I mean, I could still do it. I'm still thinking about doing it, but I'm not sure if I wanted to maybe eliminate it or make it as an extra credit. It would be something where it would be like if you chose to do it, if it were optional, you would get 10 points added onto your points value. Not 10 points to the final grade, okay? So it wouldn't be like, if you have a 75 and you got a 10, all of a sudden you're getting an 85. But if you have, how I'm working out the points, yeah? So if you ended up with, now I have to remember how many points there are for the course. Well, I think there are 600 something. But anyways, so for sake of argument, let's say you had 550 points for the course and you got a 10 on the assignment, the third paper, then you would get 560 points. You understand what I'm saying? That's a possibility. Otherwise, I could just leave things as they are, but I'm just throwing that out there to see what people think. Any opinions? Yes or no? Will give me a sense of, God bless you. For paper number 3. Just for paper number 3.
I personally score very well on the papers, so
I tell people.
Well with the tests, and if I can do well with the test and have the paper as an extra credit, I think that would help a lot of grades.
Okay. All right, that gives me a sense. All right. Yeah. Yeah, I would still like to give it rather than just a limit. This is my personal view, and this is not meant to influence anybody, but I'd still like to give it just so I don't want to feel like I'm lowering the standards, but also I want to help people out. And if I can take that pressure off, that it's an extra credit rather than a required assignment, I thought maybe that would be helpful. Yes. All right. Well, I'll leave it out there. Think about it. Hello, Ms. Castillo. Think about it, and maybe you could tell me what you think at the break, or if you want to tell me at the break, or send me an email, or you can just interrupt me if you want to say something. Just raise your hand and say something. That's fine. Castillo, so everybody's here. Otherwise, if I don't hear, people are not interested, then I might just leave it. Just, let it be, leave the standard. But if I think that it's going to help a lot of people out, I think that having it still required, but as an extra credit that you could choose to do, still required in the sense that it's there. But anyways, okie dokie. Moving on to, is religion violent? The next question I wanted to address. And we had a reading that pertains to this, a reading hopefully which you have done by now, but if not, you'll get a sense of what the reading basically was about from this interview that I'm going to show, a little short interview with this man, Christopher Hitchens. He wrote a book called God is Not Great. It was one of the readings, and I chose the chapter called Religion Kills. So that kind of gives you a sense of where Hitchens is coming from. There was another chapter where he talks about ethics and religion and how you don't have to be religious to be ethical. And in fact, if you are religious, sometimes it makes people more unethical because they do horrible things in the name of religion. But I thought that, you know, that wasn't necessary to read. Maybe in the future I might require that. And why I'm telling it to you now, I don't know. So stop rambling, Dr. Dunn. So here's an interview with Hitchens, and I'm going to play the interview. It's from a CNN interview he did with Anderson Cooper. This was many years ago when he was alive, because he's been dead for over 10 years now. But it's a good summary of his book and his thought. And then I'm going to discuss and respond to some of his ideas, because his point of view would be that religion is violent. But I'll let him speak for himself. Put this up here. Da-da-da-dee. Turn the lights on. That's for you, Miss Philistine. I know you now. You like it dark.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Before the break, we were talking about the firestorm between Mitt Romney and Reverend Al Sharpton. Sharpton says his remarks that sparked the storm weren't aimed at Romney, who is Mormon. He says they were directed at the man he was debating at the time, Christopher Hitchens, an author and outspoken atheist. The title of his latest book, God is Not Great, How Religion Poisons Everything, pretty much sums up Hitchens' view of all things religion. I talked to him recently. In the book, God is Not Great, what is your problem with religion? I'm sure you've been asked this question a million times. I just want to read something from the book. You said, religion poisons everything as well as a menace to civilization. It's become a threat to human survival. Why do you see religion as purely a destructive force?
It can't keep itself to itself. It has to go out and try and convert others, try to impose itself on others. For example, if you take one case, the present Pope says, okay, AIDS in Africa is bad, but condoms much worse. That's going to mean a lot of people will die for a dogma of this kind. President Pope is also saying we should teach children about hell all over again. That's ruined the lives and childhoods of millions of people. It's a wicked thing to be saying. And it's a falsehood as well.
But can you be...
Cartoonists in Denmark can't do their job without death threats, believable ones, serious ones, attempts to sabotage the whole Danish economy. Settlers on the West Bank are trying to bring on the Messiah and try for Armageddon and bring on the end of the world. They won't leave us alone. So I think that it's time that people who are secular and skeptical banded together a bit and said, enough already.
Do you see any benefit to believing in a God? Any positive impact on society?
No, I like religious music, and there are several religious poets, John Donne and George Herbert, I suppose would be the main ones, without whom I couldn't manage. Gothic architecture, not so much devotional painting, I must say, but that's cultural. And we owe religion a lot in that respect for art. And of course we all have our transcendent moments. But I'm not going to be told what to do by people of so-called faith. And I do think we have a perfectly good alternative tradition. Thomas Jefferson, Thomas Paine, Albert Einstein, Spinoza, the rationalists, the Greeks. Science is just as beautiful, if not more so.
I want to read something else from the book. Religion comes from the period of human prehistory where nobody had the smallest idea what was going on. It comes from the bawling and fearful infancy of our species and is a babyish attempt to meet our inescapable demand for knowledge. There are, though, I mean, your view of religion seems to be the extremes or the fundamentalists in all faiths. Do you not see anyone who believes in rationality, who reason or questions?
I'm not talking about the extremists. And people like Aquinas and Augustine, the great fathers of the church, had no idea of germ theory of disease, so they thought disease was a punishment, or a plague was a punishment from God for wickedness, or sometimes it had been started by the Jews. They believed in astrology, they believed in limbo for the souls of unborn children. They had no knowledge of the cosmos at all. They didn't even know that the earth goes around the sun. But we have minds, and so people will often prefer a conspiracy explanation to none at all.
And yet, though, today...
Or a mad one to none at all, but now we've outgrown all that. We don't need it. My kids know more about the natural order than Aquinas did.
And yet, people still want religion in their lives. They want a belief in their life.
Not try to take it away from them. They mustn't think that they have any divine permission to intervene in mine. That's where the line will be crossed. And that's why I've written a book urging the secular to stick up for themselves more, in the confidence that there are many more of us than the religious people think.
Would the world be a better place without religion?
Certainly it would, yes. If such a thing were possible, I really have to argue against myself in a way here. I know that that will never happen, and in some ways I would miss it if it all went away. But this is an argument about all the most important things: where we come from, what's the meaning of life, what are our duties to one another, and so forth. I just think you can do this perfectly ethically without any appeal to the supernatural, and I think that's been proved repeatedly. You think of the character of people like Spinoza or Einstein, you're talking about morally exemplary people. Whereas you think of the character of about half of the known popes, imams, mullahs, rabbis, and so on, you find incitements to the most appalling evil and bigotry all over the place. Northern Ireland has just recovered today from what? Beginning to recover. 25 years of too much religion.
The book, Scott, is not great. It's incredibly well written, and no doubt will provoke a lot of thought. I appreciate it. Thanks
Very nice for you to say so.
Thanks
for having me.
Thanks. Before the break, we were talking about the firestorm between Mitt Romney and Reverend Al Sharpton. Sharpton says his remarks that sparked the storm weren't aimed at Romney, who is Mormon. He says they were directed at the man.
You can tell it's dated there because they're talking about Mitt Romney, and that's when Mitt Romney was running for office, the presidency. Didn't win, of course. Barack Obama won. So it's a little bit dated, but anyways, and it has to be because, as I said, he's dead now, and this has to be at least, well, it's now over 10 years. He rest in peace. Christopher Hitchens, what do you think? What sparked your interest in what he said? Comments? Agreements? Disagreements? Some days I go quickly through this cup of coffee, and some days I go slow, you know? So like but today I'm going quickly. I gotta ration. I'm sorry, I looked up and I'll start. Okay, so Ms. Randazzo.
I think it's his opinion, you know, and I think he's more than entitled to his opinion. I don't necessarily agree with it. I think, you know, he's biased, but I think, you know, everyone's biased a little bit. His opinion based on his life experiences, and I don't think it's like, you know, the worldview that can apply to everyone, you know, but I think it's just for people.
What do you think about how his description of he thinks religious people are like?
I think that is very biased. I think he's, I guess, taking that to an extreme. You know, I think he's looking at individual examples and applying it to, you know, everyone.
Interesting. Ms. Link? I got you. I'm just going in.
Well, I definitely disagree with him. You know, I'm a very religious person. However, it was nice to see, like, it was cool to see his reasonings behind what he was saying. I took note when he said, the Pope said that AIDS are bad in Africa, condoms are worse. Like, to me, that's a little bit blasphemous. But
Blasphemous how? From the Pope to say that?
Yeah.
Or for him to say about the Pope?
for the Pope to say that. And I'm a
okay.
very religious person, you know, so it's like, I don't know.
Yeah,
I do see his side from what he's saying. Is what he's saying.
From Hitchens. And again, I mean, this is one of those things where, again, it's dated, so it's, you know, I actually haven't, I think I have uploaded it to YouTube, because I'm not sure you can still find it on YouTube, but what he's referring to is Pope Benedict XVI. When he's referring to the Pope, he's not referring to the current Pope, Pope Francis. He's referring to who came before Francis, who is still alive. He just resigned. I think he said that, you know, we are an old Pope. And I don't want to be ageist or anything, but, you know, but he said it. He said, you know, basically, I'm old. You know, I'm tired and I'm old, and it's a lot of work to be Pope, you know. Although I don't know. I mean, I think it would be nice to be Pope. I mean, you know, you got like the Monsignors rubbing you, giving you foot rubs at the end of the day, and, you know, you can have whatever kind of food you want. You have the cardinals in the kitchen making Indian food, and, you know, yeah. Pope is hungry! Yeah. Anyways, so Benedict XVI, XVI, 10 plus 5 plus 1 is 16. So Benedict 16. So, and that's what he's referring to. I believe Benedict took a trip to Africa, a pastoral trip to Africa, where at that time, and this was again over 10 years ago, so this is like the 2010s, and it might have been the late 2000s, and where Africa has a lot of problems with AIDS. They might still have it, but they did have it definitely then. And it's not necessarily what you might think. It's a lot of it has to do with, people are just having sexual activity, obviously, but they're having it indiscriminately, apparently, and they're not using condoms, or they're not using these sort of protection. And so the governments in Africa were saying, let's get condoms in the hands of, men, so that they can wear them, so they're not passing on the virus. Yeah, go ahead.
He also kind of contradicts himself, because he says that the world would be a better place without religion, but then right afterwards he said that he wouldn't miss religion.
Yeah.
So.
But maybe that's like an old frenemy, don't you think? Like someone you can't stand, but someone you always used to have, little spats with.
Any of my enemies I can't stand on, but.
So yeah, so there is that contradiction. And again, to just explain again what I was saying about the Pope and the condom, just so I want to make it clear. So I get the Pope's view was that yes, there was a value to protecting against AIDS, the transmission of AIDS, but try to find other more ethical, moral ways that he could accept, because condoms inhibit the promotion of life, the creation of human life. So that was it. Yes, Ms. O'Connor, did you have a statement?
I was just gonna say, when you said the part where he thinks that sometimes people push religion too much on other people, I kind of agree with that. I'm not religious myself either. I don't really have a side issues or whatever, but I do think that with social media, I do think a lot of people expect other people to follow a certain religion or have a certain mindset just because it's like the societal opinion. So that's what I think. But everything else I don't really care about.
Everything else you don't like. But...
I just don't really follow religion, because I just don't really care about it.
Okay. I mean, it's certainly. Well, what did you think about? Hitchens. Yeah, people might try to push stuff on you, but like Hitchens wrote a whole book. He's on CNN. Do you think maybe he's...
I think that still counts. Still right. I think writing a book is still pushing it. And I think he tries to say, though, that he didn't mean for it to push people to stop believing it. He said it was another reason why he wrote it, I think, for people to, open up more about, not believing in religion, I think it was, but he was still spreading it.
Yeah.
And I think that is a way of pushing it on people, but
That's
he claims it's
interesting.
not. But
Yeah, he wouldn't think that, but that's interesting.
I think it is.
Okay. Anybody else? Comments or thoughts? Yes, Ms. Millie.
So for me, I really did not understand. I thought that his argumentation didn't really have a depth to it. It was, for me, applying particulars to making it universal, kind of. And it's not about, we're not being religious, but, I thought that it did not really have a base. It kind of really opinionated. And what he was saying from the interview now, I felt like it was more rational. So if you're rational, that means anti-violence, or the rationalists, and that religion is simply not rational. So I found that argument here in the interview, but when I read the text, I thought that it had not really a full-fledged argumentation to it. It was more like a provocative, polarizing kind of, very opinionated, which it's his opinion, but argumentation-wise, I didn't think it had a lot of weight.
Yeah. And that might be my fault because I'm using an interview which on CNN, and I wouldn't expect CNN to have full-scale debates,
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
It's just what I thought from reading also, like I did not really get like his argumentation, like really what, it was more opinionated for me, but maybe that's just how I read it.
Oh, you mean even in the book, the reading from the book?
Yeah, I thought that
Yeah.
he was being more superficial, and he was not really giving a depth on reason why he really. Okay, maybe I'm just going.
No, I understand. I just don't want to interrupt you. I don't want to. No, if you're done.
I thought that he really took this particular cases to build on his argumentation.
Yeah.
And, you know, like a very holistic picture of religion is just evil. It's just
Yeah, it's like
without going into like.
you're telling a person all your bad points. It's like breaking up with somebody, you know? Oh, I know why I broke up with you, because you were this, you were that, you were the other, you're everything, and you remember nothing good about the person. And it's the thing with religion. It's like, well, religion has done this, and religious people have done that, and some religious person said this, and therefore the whole thing is bad. There's just one big lump of badness, you know? I want a sip of coffee, but I got it. Control yourself, Dr. Dunn. Anyways. But again, remember now, I mean, Hitchens, of course, he went out to promote his book. So there are a lot of things on YouTube you can find of him giving interviews and discussions. And he did do a number of debates with people, even his own brother, who is also kind of an intellectual, Peter Hitchens, I think his brother's name is, who is a religious person. So they had a debate, which frankly I'm not really that interested in. I don't want to see two brothers fighting. You know, it's because they like each other too much. There won't be any good. There won't be any fireworks, you know, because they know, or maybe there will be fireworks because they're siblings. So, so he, you know, if I showed you one of his longer things, which was like an hour long, then you get a sense of. But even I can tell you, I've watched some of them, and just because I find him interesting. I mean, I could listen to, with that accent, I could listen to Christopher Hitchens read the telephone book, as the saying goes. But even in those longer talks, you're right. I found that his knowledge of religion was very superficial. It was very, he was never apparently very religious in his life, and it does not seem like he took the time to really learn religion and what people think about it. He just has his views of how religious people are. So, anybody else? Any other thoughts or comments? I know he dances all over the place, so I have to give some background information on some of the people he's talking about. I thought it was, one thing I'll just throw this out there that I thought was interesting was, he says that he doesn't want religious people to force their views on others. You know, they don't have a right to tell me what to do, basically, he says. And then he says, but we have a perfectly good alternative tradition, which he calls rationalism, whatever that is. He also calls it science. So, okay, so maybe he's talking about science, empirical science, the scientific method. So when I'm listening to that, I'm like, okay, you object to it when it's a religious person trying to push a point of view and say you should believe this or think this. But if it's a rationalist or a scientific person, that's okay. I mean, they can tell you how the world is. They can tell me how to live my life, what I'm supposed to think, because they're rationalists. That's okay. I mean, did anyone else catch that? Am I understanding him properly or misunderstanding him? What? Did you have your hand up or no? Ms. Link? No, okay. Oh, da, 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 da.
I think he makes like a very clear distinction between science and religion, which I know is like a very common like I guess way of thinking, especially like in Western thought. Like it's these two things are like opposite to each other. Like you either believe in science or you either believe in religion. Because at least I knew it. I think these two things don't necessarily not to like neglect each other, you know, just because like the Christian church, they got like a couple things wrong, like, you know, in medieval time, you know, like maybe they thought like, yeah, the earth is the center of the universe, that was proven wrong. It doesn't necessarily mean that like religion and science are just incompatible with each other. There's a lot of like, you know, I think there are like ways to do both, or like, you know, you can use science as like an explanation for like certain religious things, you know, or like, and just, I don't know, I think me personally, I don't think that those two things are necessarily opposites, and I guess he was using that as one of his main points of like, you know, science is, you know, we can test science, we can like easily prove it's correct, so therefore religion is wrong.
But you can't necessarily do that with religion.
Yeah, he says, I guess a lot of people think, you know, oh, you can take to like prove that God is real, so I guess people don't believe that, you know?
Yeah. And like Anderson Cooper kind of asks him about that, doesn't he? Because he says, aren't there any, you know, you seem to be talking in the extremes. Don't you think there are any people who might be rationalist and not just be extreme? Can you accept both? It's interesting. I'm not sure religion religion acts differently, but I'm not sure that it doesn't act like science in a lot of ways and like proving things. Because, you know, if I like went to my priest and said, you know, oh, I think I'm possessed by the devil, you know, I'm hearing voices, and my voices are telling me to do evil things. They're not. I'm not hearing voices. Well, I'm not hearing voices, first of all, and they're not telling me to do anything good or bad, because I'm not hearing voices, okay? But let's say I go to my priest. I'm hearing, you know, telling me to do bad things, so I think I'm possessed by a demon or something. Well, I mean, the priest is not just going to immediately, like, give me a blessing and start doing exorcism. The Catholic Church, from what I understand, has a whole very detailed process of investigation that has to go on, part of which is they send you to a psychiatrist. That's probably one of the first things they're going to do to make sure you're not schizophrenic. And only at the end of the process, when it's completely inexplicable by medical science, then they might say, okay, we might have to do some kind of exorcism, which is kind of a blessing ceremony where they call on God to cast the demon out. Now, let's say I'm an atheist and I don't believe in demons and I don't believe people can be possessed by demons. However, I would still have to think in honesty say, that's like the scientific method. I mean, you have to prove it. It's not just, oh yeah, you know, Father says that because the statue of the Virgin Mary has water on its face, it must be crying, you know? No, even the local bishop has to send people to investigate, because it might just be a leaky pipe, you know, a broken water pipe, or it might be humidity or something. It might not be a miracle at all. There's always an investigation, which is kind of, again, like, now, I might not agree with it if I were an atheist or an agnostic. I might say, oh, it's still hooey, it's still false. But there's still some kind of empirical process going on that I don't think Hitchens recognizes. Okay. Does anyone have any other comment? Or otherwise, I'll just start into my discussion of Hitchens. If anyone doesn't have a comment. But if you have a comment, just raise your hand and let me know. Christopher Hitchens, I'll give you a little background on who he is. I've already mentioned a little bit. Let me get my PowerPoint going here. Is religion violent? Here we have two pictures. The top one is by this artist called Caravaggio, who was an artist in the 17th century, so the 1600s, and painted this picture of this man, Abraham, who is about to kill his son Isaac. So it's called the sacrifice of Isaac. Abraham and Isaac, his son Isaac. And he's doing this because he believes he has been told to by his God. That his God has given him a command to sacrifice your son to me. Show me how devoted you are by killing your son for me. And so Abraham says, okay, because, and you find this in religion, because you're a God and I'm not a God. I'm a human being, so I have to do what you say or you might hurt me. Because the God could still kill his son. Could just say, okay, well, I'll take his life from him then. If you won't kill him for me, I'll do it. Forget about whether that's a good or bad thing. It's just gods can do what gods want to do in a lot of religions because they're gods. I think I made that point before when I was talking about religion. So anyway, so that's a picture of this. But God does not really want Abraham to do this. He doesn't want human sacrifice, as you find in some religions. So he sends an angel, and you can see the angel on the left, who is represented as this young man, nude, of course. Oh, I guess always nude. Don't they have any clothes in heaven? Put some clothes on, Anyways, coming down to grab Abraham's arm, grab his wrist, and tell him, no, do not lay a finger on the boy. Okay. This other picture is a picture of the goddess Kali. Kali. And Kali has a rather interesting story that I'm not going to go into of how she came about. If we were doing a world religions class in Hinduism, then I can talk about the goddess Kali, but I'm not going to. She's a very powerful goddess in the religion of Hinduism, sometimes even more powerful than the male gods. And so here she is, a picture. I got this picture. I think I got a world religions textbook that I was using for a course. Got it for free, teacher's copy. And in the teacher's copy, it had a CD. Remember, they used to be doing this. I don't know if they still do this with textbooks and whatever, but it was the big thing, like in the 90s and the 2000s, to put a CD with everything. So not only did you have the paper book, but you had all this stuff on your computer with pictures and things, which, in my experience, I almost never used. And as you know, with the internet and computers, that by the time you take the CD out of its case, it's already outdated. You know what I'm saying? But anyways, so I still have this picture of Kali, which I think is a good one from that CD. And yes, she has a garland of heads, severed heads. She wears a necklace of severed heads. She has severed arms that she's using as a skirt to hide her nakedness. She's holding another severed head with the blood draining out of it. No, this is not a Halloween image. This is Kali. And Kali is very violent. She gets out of control. And the story for this and why she looks this way is because she had to fight a god. Well, it wasn't really a god. He was more of a demon, a bad god, you might say, a Hindu demon called Raktabija. I'm spelling this correctly. Yeah, I know. Raktabija, I believe there's an H there. And what does that mean? It means seed of blood or blood. One of these things means blood. I think Rakta is blood and Bija is seed. But anyways, Raktabija was able to coerce to get a promise from one of the good gods that no one could kill him, that if they tried to kill him and cut him, one drop of his blood would, when it hit the ground, would turn into like 10 Raktabijas. So if you ever tried to kill him, anytime you drew blood from him, the blood would spill and you'd have like 1,000 or maybe hundreds of thousands of new Raktabijas to deal with, okay? So it was an impossible situation. So Raktabija knows he cannot be really killed or defeated in battle by anybody, so he goes crazy. He starts destroying and killing and doing all sorts of nastiness because he's a demon. He's a bad god in Hinduism. So he does what bad gods do. He acts badly. Well, they finally create this goddess Kali. I'm not telling you the whole story. I'm just basically she's created, and she comes into existence, and she's furious. And what she does is Kali, and that's why her tongue is. You notice her tongue, her blood red tongue is hanging out because she runs around, and as she's cutting Raktabija, you see here her sword with his blood. She's also using this immense tongue to then lap up the blood and to eat the blood. So that what happens is no blood from Raktabija is actually allowed to touch the ground and create more. And even in the cases where that does happen, where, she misses a spot, you might say, and some Raktabija, she laps them up immediately. So none of them are getting away from her. But she becomes so crazy and crazed by her bloodlust that she then, once Raktabija is defeated, she's cut off his head, she's drunk all of his blood, okay, no more Raktabijas can be created because she's eaten them all, she's consumed them all. She starts going on a rampage of killing and starts destroying the earth. And so even the male gods are terrified of her, they don't know what to do. And one of the gods finally is able to calm her down and stop her. Again, I'm not telling you the whole story. But anyway, so that's why she looks like the way she does. So is religion violent? Well, think about these two pictures. You have a goddess in Hinduism who is extremely violent. You have a picture of a man from the Bible, Abraham, who is condemned to perform violence by his God. So those are a couple of things we can think about while I'm talking here. Is religion violent? It seems to be, yes, it is. It can be under certain circumstances. Okay. Christopher Eric Hitchens is his full name, and you can see his dates there. He was born in 1949, and he died in 2011. As if you could not already tell, probably tell, because he could have been from somewhere else, but he has a British accent, so he was British, and he was a reporter, a writer, a debater, and generally what we would call a polemicist or a controversialist, someone who likes to criticize other people's views. There's a picture of Hitchens. He took a lot of pictures, and I think he likes that kind of adversarial pose. He's like sitting there like, okay, argue with me. Go ahead. Let's have an argument. Because he knows he'll win, A polemicist, and there's a definition. One of the few definitions. I wasn't able to come up with a lot of definitions for this one, so anywho. What is a polemicist? A polemicist is someone who is warlike or hostile. It comes from the Greek word polemikos. A polemos, you take out the mic here, or actually say the ik, I should say, and polemos is war. So polemikos is the adjective, so to be warlike or hostile. So a polemicist is someone who challenges or attacks the opinions or the principles of another. That's what a polemicist is. Polemicist is. Or another way to put it is he's a controversialist. He likes to stir the pot. He likes controversy. Doesn't mean he doesn't believe in what he's saying. Some people like to stir the pot just to stir the pot and see what happens. No, I think he was sincere in his beliefs. Controversialist. He was born in Portsmouth, the United Kingdom, British. And if I can, well, I know I can, but I'm going to go on computer, go on Google Maps. And don't worry about my Gmail. There's nothing interesting there. Nothing you can blackmail me with, people. Unless you like opera and you want to blackmail me with going to Rigoletto. Let's go Google Maps. No, it's slow because I'm using it through my cell phone. So I'll come back to it when I get the map. He was educated in what they might call upper crust English schools, so very high level English. He had a very high level of English schooling. Oh, there we go. And he graduated from Oxford University, which is one of the oldest, if not, it might be the oldest from the 1200s, but it's one of the oldest universities in the world. And so he graduated from there. Let's see if I can find Portsmouth, UK here. Whoops. Portsmouth, UK. Let's see where you are. Oh, it's on the seashore. Looks like. Oh, that's interesting. So it's the very southern part of the United Kingdom, very of England, you might say. Okay, so here's the United Kingdom, and so it's right down here in the south, just right across from France. Oh, okay, so that's where he was born. Interesting. Da 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 da. Excuse me. He was very left-wing politically in his politics, a socialist, you might say, early on. But I don't know what he became later on. I'm not sure if he changed his mind or he was still basically a socialist, and maybe it doesn't matter so much, but I just mention it to give you some information about where he was coming from or where he is coming from. He was a heavy drinker and a smoker, and it's the smoking that killed him. He died in middle age. He wasn't very old when he found that he had esophageal cancer, so cancer of the esophagus, while he was a smoker, so you can imagine where that came from. And so he died from complications with that. And he is known for writing against against what he considered to be a resurgence of religiously motivated and, in his opinion, violent Islam, which he described as Islamofascism. Islamofascism. Islamo, of course, comes from Islam, the religion Islam, and fascism comes from a political system, and fascism is basically a political system. It's kind of like a totalitarian system. Basically, the government runs everything. The government does everything. It's kind of like socialism in that sense, that the society is, you're one common society, so everyone contributes in the society and everyone receives benefits in the society. Whereas in our system, which is, well, we say it's democratic, but it's, each person is kind of an individual, and you have to kind of take care of yourself, and you have to be an entrepreneur. You're encouraged to be an entrepreneur, to start your own business, to make your own money, to make yourself wealthy or a success, to take care of your own needs, pay for your own health care, pay for your retirement. Whereas in, say, a totalitarian system like fascism, the government controls everything, but it also gives out the benefits to everybody. So everybody's taken care of from birth until death. But you're taken care of by the state, and so you owe your allegiance to the state. The focus is always on the state, the government, as the focus of your allegiance for your country. So that's kind of like a very short understanding of what fascism is. And why does he think that Islam is fascism? Because Islam is very focused on the community, not individuals. You're not an individual who makes your own decisions and decides to live your own life. You're always under, you could say, the law of God, to which everyone is called to give submission. You are supposed to submit to the will of God in everything. And that includes government. So the government has to reflect the will of God, and everyone has, and so you usually have that kind of totality where You live to serve the community. And the community serves you back. Okay, so I'm not saying it's all bad, or any of it's bad. I mean, it's just a different way of doing government. I mean, there's nothing necessarily bad or good about it in a sense. If it's good if it works. If it's a government that works, then it's good. If it's a government that doesn't work, then it's bad. You know, it needs to be changed, I guess. But he is using fascism in the bad sense, in the sense of almost like a cult, total control. And there are these Muslims out there, in Hitchens' view, or in what his view was, there were Muslims out there that want total control of the world and of Muslims' lives. And so he calls them Islamo-fascists. And he thought, so when he's talking in the interview about these religious people who want to tell me what to do, a lot of the times, yes, does he have Christians in the back of his mind? I think so, because some of his examples are Christian. But more often than not, I think he really was directing his stuff towards Islam. He really thought Islam was becoming violent and intolerant and was trying to spread itself throughout the world through violence. That was his belief. Not saying I agree with it, but that's where I think he was coming from. After the September 11th attacks in 2001 on the United States, Hitchens believed that his views had been confirmed, basically. Because the men on those planes were Muslims, I don't even know if they were practicing Muslims. I've heard different stories that, they were doing it for religion, and I've heard other people say that, for example, what's her name, Karen Armstrong, that we didn't listen to Karen Armstrong. Well, we read her article, yes. The Myth of Religious Violence, right, by Karen Armstrong. But there's also a talk she gives. Maybe I'll play the talk. I'll find somewhere to fit it in. But anyways, where she talks about the fact that a lot of the hijackers maybe hadn't even read the Quran, which is the holy book of Islam. They had a basic knowledge of their religion, but they weren't generally practicing. They were, and they might not have even really been well versed in having read the Quran, their religious book. What they were, though, was angry at the United States for a number of political and economic reasons. And so if you think about it, because people think, well, it was a religious attack on America. Yeah, but the hijackers didn't fly planes into St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City, did they? Or into a synagogue. You know, they didn't try to fly them into any churches or any kind of religious institutions. Where did they try to fly? Where did they fly the planes into? The World Trade Center, business, the Pentagon, military, and who knows where the third plane was going to, because the third plane was still not entirely sure about what happened to the third plane. The story that's been given down is that the people rushed the attackers and the attackers just lost control of the plane and they flew it into the ground. Okay? There are other stories. But nevertheless, we know there was a third plane that went down in Pennsylvania. Where was that going? Chicago? Where? I don't know. Pittsburgh? Who knows? We don't know because they're all dead, unfortunately. So we don't know what they were planning to do with that one. But they certainly didn't appear to be attacking any religious icons, religious symbols of our country. Anyways, the attacks on the United States confirmed for him this problem of Islamofascism, and so he became even more negative on Islam, and not just Islam, but all religion. In 2003, the United States decided, for a variety of reasons, I don't know who. Was anyone here not born in 2003? 2003? Is anyone? You were not born.
Oh, wait.
Well, when 2003, let's see. Because September 11th, or the Iraq War happened in 2003. So it's 20 years later. So yeah, you should all have been born, right? At least you should have been babies, like 1 or 2 years old. Okay, fine. I just wanted to establish it because no one here was born during the September 11th attacks, yes? In 2001. Oh, you were already born?
Yeah.
Baby?
Yeah.
Okay, baby, okay. Because it's just one of those things I have to establish, because you'll understand this as you grow up, and when you start getting into your 30s and early 40s, you remember things that happened, and you're talking, you'll be talking, and it will happen, because it happens, I think that happens to just about everybody. You'll be talking to someone who is a lot younger than you, and you're not looking at them like that, you're just talking to them as a human being, but you talk about some major event that happened, and they don't have any memory of it. It's like black and white film in their mind. It's like watching the Kennedy assassination. Well, the Kennedy assassination was captured in color, but you get my point, right? It's like watching the Kennedy assassination from the 1960-some Zapruder film. So you mention September 11th to someone, and the person might, we talked about it in high school, but I don't remember anything. Well, I remember it, because I was teaching at a school that was just in Wayne. And so you could see New York City on the horizon. You could see the city, and you could see the smoke. I couldn't see the World Trade Center, though, because it was blocked by a building that was in front of me in the town. But so anyways, what's my point? My point is this, yes. A couple years later, the President of the United States decided we needed to invade Iraq to bring democracy, by bringing democracy and democratic government to certain Islamic countries, although they tried not to make it about us versus Islam. I'm not sure how successful they were with that. But President George W. Bush decided we needed to bring democracy to the Middle East. So we'll do this by invading the country of Iraq and getting rid of the dictator Saddam Hussein. This man Saddam Hussein, who, I hate to say, anyone who knew the history of that region of the world knew that Saddam Hussein was actually our dictator. He worked for us against the communists and against the Iranians, but anyways, we needed an enemy. And unfortunately, Saddam came up on the, like on the Wheel of Fortune, tick, 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 tick. Who's it going to be? Assad, Hussein, Khomeini, tick, 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 tick. Saddam Hussein. Okay, there you go. You're the lucky winner, Saddam. And so we invaded Iraq. Now, Hitchens was very much in favor of that invasion because he thought that that's what Islam needed. This Islamofascism needed to be combated. His aversion or his dislike for religion has been around for a long, long time. It wasn't just for, to sell a book, okay, even though he did sell a book. But he was sincere about his dislike for religion. But he had written about other things. I mean, he had gone after major people who were not religious. He had gone after Bill Clinton in his famous book called No One Left to Lie To, where he talks about Clinton after having been president of the United States. So he did not like Clinton very much. Now, and I'm just, he's written more things, as we know. Or I should say he wrote more things, as we know. I shouldn't use the present perfect. I should use the past perfect, because he's dead. Because in our reading from Hitchens, I give you a copy of the first, the title page of his book, and right next to the title page, it gives you a whole list of other books that he's written. So I'm just pointing out some that as a controversialist and a polemicist, his main focus, I think, or he did have a focus on religion, but not maybe he did have other focuses. The triangulations of William, No One Left to Lie To, the triangulations of William Jefferson Clinton, triangulations like a triangle of lie to this person, tell the person another lie to cover up the first lie, tell a person a third lie to cover up the other two lies. That's what he's getting at. God bless you. The trial of Henry Kissinger. I mean, Henry Kissinger might still be alive, but I think he was Secretary of State under Richard Nixon, and Hitchens thought that he was a war criminal. Okay, so anyway, so he goes after people. And in the case of religion, we have a couple of books he wrote. He wrote a small volume against Mother Teresa called The Missionary Position. Yeah. Yeah, he doesn't pull any punches. So 1995, that book came out, and it's apparently not a very long book. I don't think it's even 200 pages long. But it's basically a full-scale attack on Mother Teresa of Calcutta. This woman, she was not Indian, she was actually Albanian by descent, but she went to India as a missionary, and she saw people on the streets who were just dying, not receiving any hospice care or anything. And so she did that. She decided to create a hospice where people who were dying could come in and could die around other people. They weren't alone. They had their basic needs. You have to understand, these people are dying. It's not like they're going to cure them. That wasn't her mission. Her mission was to take care of the people on the streets who were just already dying. But they would take care of them as best they could and allow them to have a human, respectable death. He did not like that. He thought that Mother Teresa was very full of herself and was self-serving, really, and that she was really just an arch-conservative Catholic nun. She was against the things he was for. So she was anti-abortion. She was also anti-condoms, anti-whatever other views that he did not agree with. And so she was just using her charity work, he claimed, to push her cause. So that was kind of his argument in this book. And then we have his other book that comes later in 2007, God is Not Great. Now, it's interesting the year that this was written, because remember I told you 2003 is when we invaded Iraq. So I'll write this down on the board. Actually, I'll erase it so people can you see the board. Put that. (2003), and he writes his book in 2007, God is Not Great. Well, at the time I had to kind of chuckle to myself, because I kind of knew why he wrote the book God is Not Great. It's because the Iraq war that he supported was a disaster. The people did not welcome us as heroes. They certainly hated Saddam Hussein. I think Iraqis were happy to get Saddam Hussein, but they didn't want to go from one dictator to another dictator, basically, which was go from Saddam Hussein to the U.S. Army, So hopefully they're a peaceful country now. Hardly ever hear about them on the news. So they are still, the country's still there. So I'm going to assume that they're making it work without Saddam Hussein. So that's a good thing. But at the time that he wrote his book, things were not looking good. Things were very bad. And eventually we left, and they told us to leave. They basically said, okay, we've got this for ourselves. We don't even want you to leave military bases, just go away. And so we did. God is Not Great. This is his attack on religion in general. However, from the title, God is Not Great, How Religion Poisons Everything, you can probably tell which religion he particularly does not like. Again, it's Islam. Because one of the great exclamations of a Muslim, a saying of faith, is God is great, God is great. And Muslims and Muslimas, Muslim women, will say that all the time when there's a great event, when they're expressing their praise of God. Or if there's a bad event and they need God's help, they'll remind themselves that God is always greater than any evil. God is great, God is great. God is not great, says Hitchens. On the contrary. Although he never proves that God isn't great in the book, I don't think, or at least in the chapter we read. He proves that God-believing people are not so great. Not so. God bless you. With this book, Hitchens got himself made part of this kind of informal group. I'm just going to mention them. This informal group called the New Atheists. And there are 4 of them. Well, there used to be 4 of them. Hitchens is dead. But at the time, it was Hitchens, this man Sam Harris, who I believe is a neuroscientist. You have Richard Dawkins, who is a biologist, and this man Daniel Dennett, who is a philosopher. Okay, and these guys are all still alive. I believe Hitchens is dead. So the question is, well, who should be the fourth man of the new atheist? And some people have suggested the comedian Bill Maher, but I don't know if it's official. But a little interesting fact, after his mom's death, Hitchens' mom's death, he found out that she was Jewish, which, according to Jewish law, made him a Jew, because Judaism goes through the mother, it doesn't go through the father. So if both your parents are Jewish, then obviously you'll be Jewish, you'll be considered Jewish. But you have to have at least your mother be an ethnic Jew in order to be a Jew. And if we were, again, doing a world religions course on Judaism, I would talk a little bit more about that. Nevertheless, he found out that his mother had in fact been a Jew, a Jewish woman, which made Hitchens a Jew. Which, when I heard about that, I thought, God has a sense of humor. Yeah. I'm just saying, God, God has a sense of humor. It's like, anyways, take that for what it's worth. The points that Hitchens makes in his talk. Let's see what the. Okay, I'll get to these pictures in a little bit, but to talk about some of the points that Hitchens makes, he says that through its various conflicts, religion has caused great suffering on humanity. Religion has a tendency for not just imposing its own viewpoint, he says, but for doing it violently. It can't keep itself to itself. It has to force its viewpoint on other people. And except for saying this, I'm not sure how he knows that religion does that. Yes, you might get the knock on your door sometime in your life, and you open it, and it's the Mormon missionaries, hello, I'm Elder Jackson, and hello, I'm Elder Jones, and we'd like to talk to you about another testament of Jesus Christ, Or you have some Jehovah's Witness who is on the street corner handing out copies of the Watchtower magazine, just handing them out, not tell you guy you better take it or I'll punch you, They're just handing them out, and people can take them or not if they want to. I often do because I find it interesting, see what's going on with the Watchtower. I'm Catholic, so I know I'm going to hell for them. But I just, I'm not Mr. Randazzo. I just want to know what reason it is this week I'm going to hell, Because I worship Mary, because I, believe in the cookie Christ, I want to know what's sending me to hell this weekend. Anyways, so how does he know that? Has this ever happened? Has there been a violent imposition? I would say yes. I mean, it probably has happened in some cases. And yeah, I can think of one case in particular where it has happened, where people were, forcibly converted. And that would be the case in, let's say 998. I think it's 998, or is it 988? Might have been 988. Someone wants an Exeter credit point. You can fact check this for me. I think it's in the year 988 AD when Volodymyr or Vladimir, depending on whether you're Russian or Ukrainian, how you want to spell his name. I'll give both. Volodymyr converted to Christianity. And yeah, there was a mass conversion. There was the understanding that, yes, 988, thank you, Ms. Acetune Seek. And let me get over here. And turned out a little more complicated than I thought. Not when I take out the campus map. Is this it? Oh, there we go. Alrighty. The 980. So yeah, there was, I'm going by my memory. I don't know if there was actual violence towards anyone, but basically he did say everyone comes down to the river and is going to be dunked in the water to become a Christian. So I could say that, yeah, have there been kind of a violent imposition of a religious viewpoint? Yeah, I think that that has happened. And I'm not going to justify it. It's simply, it's happened. So, I mean, I don't think he's wrong necessarily about that. One might think that the Crusades, a lot of people will bring up the Crusades, which was this religious army that was sent to the Holy Land people would think they were there to convert the Muslims and the Jews, but really not. I mean, we will talk about the Crusades later, just as an example of religious violence. But the primary purpose of the Crusades was not really to impose a view. It was to take control of the Holy Land from non-Christians. It was objectionable. It was not a good thing to the Pope and to the Western Christian leaders that the place where Jesus Christ lived and died and rose again, if you believe what they believe, that area of land should be controlled by non-Christians. And then that these non-Christians should also control who can visit it. Like Christians might want to make trips there for pilgrimages to go see the Holy Land, but they can't because the Muslims are saying no. So that was a political thing for them, more so than I think trying to convert people. But people can make that argument that the Crusades would be an example of that. More often than not, though, if at least in the Christian church, I can speak for Christianity better than I can for other religions, if the Christian church wanted to convert, wanted to force its view on people, it sent out missionaries. It would send people out to preach the message, not armies. It wasn't sending out armies. Armies become an issue with colonialism, and this is something that I think that Karen Armstrong talks a little bit about in her article, "The Myth of Religious Violence." That, when you have, well, maybe she doesn't, so I don't want to say. Yeah. So delete that comment because I don't know 100%, so I don't want to say something that she doesn't say. Nevertheless, so I'm saying this. It's armies. This happens with European colonialism when Europeans European countries, around the 1400s, start looking for ways to get to Asia more quickly. They don't want to have to travel all the way down across Africa, around the coast of Africa, to get to India. Why do they want to get to India and Asia? Well, because they have spices. They have all sorts of things that the Europeans want. Spices being a big one, believe it or not. But when you're eating rotten food most of the time, because you have no refrigerators, spices help the bad go down better. You know what I'm saying? So that was more of an economic and a political change. Yes, you have armies going out throughout the world imposing their view, but it's not really a religious view, it's an economic and a political one. The Europeans established colonies in these various places. I got you. All right, well, it's 6. Well, I'll finish my thought and then we'll take our break. They buy land or they make treaties with local leaders so that they can have land in which they can establish themselves. And then they start trading with the local economy so that they can, get what they want, whatever it is. I mentioned spices, but other things, fabrics or whatever is there, food. And send it back to their home country. Now, in the context of that, missionaries might go with them, especially with the Catholics. Actually, if I remember correctly, Protestants only figure this out later, that they need to start sending missionaries, because the Catholics do it because they needed a priest. They needed someone to say Mass on the boats so that, the guys so their souls could be saved. They could receive Holy Communion and go to heaven if they died. So they would have a priest, and so they send missionaries, and they start preaching their message and making converts. But that wasn't the main thing. Colonialism was not meant to bring religion. It was meant to increase the economic and political power of the countries that had the colonies. Okay, so let's take our 10-minute break. You know why that is 6:55. No, it shouldn't be. It should be going on at 6:55. Thursday and Thursday should be 6:45 and then 6:55. Should not be going on. Oh, because I mute. Oh, that's right. That's right. That's right. Okay. That's right. Alright.
That's not war, that's murder. Okie dokie. That one. Wait.
Okay, so okay, so regarding paper number 3, we have 3 options. I can keep it, just leave it as it is. It's due later this month, and it's 100 points added to the final grade, to the computation of the final grade. I can eliminate it completely, just not do it, or I can leave it there but give it as an extra credit for, I decided to change it, make it 20 points that would be added to the total points here. So if I did that for the extra credit, you would not suffer if you chose not to do it, because all I would do is I would remove 100 points from this, so it would be 1450 instead of 550, and then I would divide everything by 1450, okay? And so that extra credit, let's say you got the full 20 points, would be added to this. I think. Let me just make sure my math is correct. Yes, taking 100 points away, and so you'd have 20 points extra added on, and would just be divided by, this would then be 100 points, or excuse me, this would be 200 points. So add these up, you get that, and divide these by that number. Does that make sense? It does? All right, I hope so. Because if I talk about math too much, it stops making sense to me. I got to be honest with you. Yes, Ms. Philistine.
Can you repeat option 3? I don't know what to do. Yeah, the extra credit.
Oh, well, that's what I'm going to ask. Okay. So how many are in favor of just keeping it as it is? Raise your hand. No, 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 no. Okay, so that's 0. Who are in favor of eliminating? No. So it looks like everyone wants it as the extra credit. Okay, so that's the one I'll do. So, I mean, if you choose not to do the extra credit, it's not like I'll still be judging you by it. I'll remove the 100 points. So this would only be 200 points because you only did 2 papers. You did the 5 quizzes, and then you did a final exam. So you'd be judged by that. If you decided to do the paper and got 20 extra points, then you'd have 20 extra points. It would be 220, possibly. And it would be 200 points for this extra credit. So it's 20 points added on. So 220 and then divided by 1450. Okay, so that's what I'll do then. La da da dee da da da. That should work. If anyone sees a fallacy or a mistake in my mathematical reasoning, let me know, please. Okay, I would say that humans have all sorts of reasons to get violent. Religion being one of them, especially when something passionately disturbs them. And religion can be that, but people can get violent for family, politics, sports, or just self-interest. I don't know that why religion is the special focus of violence for him. I mean, and violence is in the eye of the beholder. What was I going to mention that? Well, I guess I won't mention that. Violence happens differently in certain religions. Islam, for example, was spread in its early years largely through armies. Okay, so there was a violent spreading of the message, and it wasn't just that. I mean, it was purposeful. It was that they wanted to extend the power of the message that Muhammad had received to other people. And they did that by conquering them. And in the early years of Islam, there were violent quarrels, even civil wars, after this man Muhammad died. This man who you could consider the founder of Islam, but I know Muslims don't consider that. God is the founder of Islam. But from a religious studies point of view, you would say this man Muhammad is. So that's why I'm saying Muhammad. So there were civil wars. There were quarrels amongst Muslims after his death. Christianity did not so much have violence in the beginning as until the Middle Ages, from, say, the 400s, the 5th century AD until the 15th century. These are called the Middle Ages. So around the 400s AD, you have in Western Europe what historians call the Middle Ages, or we say CE as well, 400 CE. So, the first 300, 400 years, I'm not going to say there weren't problems and even sometimes, but there wasn't general violence amongst Christians, not in that sense. There weren't wars or civil wars. For that you have to really wait until the time of the Middle Ages, when Christianity comes into power and becomes the official state religion of the Roman Empire. Then you start having violence, when it gained almost complete power over European life. Just to throw in another religion from a completely different area of the world, Buddhism does not really have a history of promoting itself violently. Basically, missionaries would go out. People would go out with the message of the Buddha, of this man called Siddhartha Gautama, who's called the Buddha, the Enlightened One. It's just a title for him. And they would go out. It wasn't usually through violence, although as time goes on, Buddhists will embrace violence in some cases. It is permissible to commit violence. You're not supposed to. It's not ideal, but it might have to be accepted or tolerated. But Buddhism did not propagate itself violently. So it's kind of in the eye of the beholder, where you see violence and where you don't see violence. Just looking at my notes here and see if I want to skip over some things. All right. And of course, there are things that have been, religions have done that have been of great good to humanity. So it doesn't seem that the creation of suffering is innate or inborn to religion. It happens in religion, but it doesn't seem to be innate to religion. It can come out of something else. It comes out of a network of relationships or contexts that it has at any one time. These could be cultural things, cultural issues that might lead a religion to, or have religious people to commit violence. There might be political issues, historical issues. It may just be the situation that a religion finds itself in. Once, for example, Christianity gains complete control of the Roman Empire as the official religion, well, the empire has armies. So what do you do with that now? And Christianity has, the tradition of Christianity is to turn the other cheek, to love your enemy. So now how do you integrate that belief system into warfare, which seems to be necessary to keep the empire going? So here you have an example of an historical, a political event that kind of forces violence onto religion in a way. It's not innate to it. In current history, we don't really value religious motivations very highly, at least not in the West. So it's probably not surprising that religion is not really at the heart of a lot of conflicts these days. I mean, think of yourself. Think about the last time you heard of a purely religious war going on. I mean, we have wars going on. We have a war going on in the Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia. I'm not supposed to call it the Ukraine anymore. Sorry. I don't mean anything negative by it. It's just how I grew up. It's like talking about the Philippines. But you have that war going on. I think you still have a civil war going on in the country of Syria, which did have some religious aspects to it, but not solely. There were people who were trying to overthrow the dictator. You have a war going on in Yemen, country of Yemen. There's been a civil war going on there. Civil war still going on, I think, in Somalia. I don't think anything in Africa. There have been some coups, like in, I'm trying to think what the last coup was, Mali or something. But anyway, but none of them, maybe there was a religious element to the Syrian civil war. There is kind of a religious element to the Yemeni civil war, the one that's going on in the country of Yemen. And I probably could show you where these places are just quickly because I'm talking about them, in case you're wondering. If you're wondering, here is the Ukraine, and here is Russia, the whole country of Russia. So they're at war. Syria is down here in the Middle East. Yemen is down here at the end of the Arabian Peninsula. Somalia is right across the Gulf there, right there. I don't think we have any civil wars going on in Central or South America, although Venezuela has been unstable. I don't know if there are any other African wars going on. Here's Mali. I think Mali, the government was overthrown. I don't think there are any wars or civil wars going on in this region of the world. Burma it's a dictatorship. They have some issues. Yeah, nothing else. And nothing purely religious. And if you go back, in the last 100 years, and you could ask, where are the religious wars happening? It doesn't, and that's probably because of our Western worldview. Religion doesn't get people hot anymore like it did. I mean, 500 years ago, yes, people might have gone to war over whether an area was going to be Catholic or Protestant, Christian. Nowadays, no one cares, apparently. So religion doesn't play as large a role. So, for example, in the chapter "Religion Kills" and "God is Not Great" in his book, Hitchens does outline how religion can make things worse, but I don't think he really proves his argument that religion caused any of the conflicts he describes. There always seems to be something else. There seems to be political issues going on. A lot of times, political issues going on, or just historical hatreds between groups of people. And one group happens to be a majority of this religion, and another group seems to be a majority of that religion. You know, but that doesn't always work, because sometimes you can have Christians killing Christians. You know what I'm saying? And Muslims killing Muslims. If we want to talk about body counts, and this is a point that was often brought up in debates with Hitchens, and I'm not sure he had a really good response to it, but if you look at the past history of, say, maybe the last 100 years or so, and talk about body counts by how many millions of people have been killed, the great majority have been killed by atheistic regimes, not religious ones. The Soviet Union, China, countries, Asian countries like Cambodia. Russia was the Soviet Union, so Russia again. China's here, and Cambodia is down here, right by Vietnam and Thailand. Go down here, country of Cambodia. And other countries in Africa, we could talk about Angola, the country of Angola, here on the western, God bless you, the western coast of Angola, or of Africa. We have the country of Angola, which was communist for a period of time, atheistic communism. And I checked this out. Some person crunched the numbers, and here we go. So we have pictures here that I got from this person. What's his name? R.J. Rummel, Death by Government. He wrote a book where he crunched the numbers, and I just highlighted all the times that it was a communist and atheistic regime which was doing the killing in the last 100 years or so. And by how many millions? Cambodia comes up at the top only because so many people were killed in such a short period of time during the time of the communist regime. Within less than 4 years, they killed, what was it, over 2 million, well, it says 2 million, but it was over 2 million people in 4 years. Whereas the communists in the Soviet Union, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, they were in power for 71 years and killed 54.7 million, actually 54.8 million. Cambodia had another communist regime in the 70s into the 80s, and they killed a number of people, 230,000. Okay, you had to add the zeros on at the end here. So this is millions, 2,703,655. And China, where's China? Is China on here at all? I don't know if China's on here at all. But I have it on the other graph. Here, the same book, the same person did a study of not just the numbers of millions who've been killed by mostly atheistic regimes, non-religious countries. And when I say non-religious, I mean non-religious. These are anti-religious. These are they were atheistic. They were promoting atheism. That was their religion in a way. Okay? The rationalism, they were scientific rationalists, just like Hitchens says we should be following. That's what they were promoting. So anyways, and then the red here is for the number of those killed. So for the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the Soviet Union, which doesn't exist anymore, it's Russia today, over 60-some millions were killed. Here's China. China is around 35 millions. Germany is on here only because of the Second World War. And then China again, I think this is a different, when they had their civil war, there was a civil war for a number of years, and you had different groups. One of them was with Mao Zedong. Japan also, millions killed, and he's factoring in the Second World War. Here's Cambodia again. But notice again, he's also plotting by the time period. Okay, so the annual democide rate, the annual rate. And Cambodia, it's through the roof because, as I said, it was a matter of almost 4 years. And so many people were killed. So even though it was just a much smaller amount than, say, the Soviet Union or China, it happened within a very short period of time, whereas these happened over longer periods of time. Okay, see here also Poland. Poland was a communist country too, when you had a lot of deaths there over a short period of time. A lot of these are kind of Vietnam, North Korea, Poland, Yugoslavia. Okay, Mexico is interesting. Mexico was not a communist country, but it was an authoritarian, anti-religious state. Some people might not know that in the turn of, let's see if it's on here, on this one. Yeah, here's Mexico. From 1900 till 1920, you have over 1.4 million people killed by the government for being Catholic. Mexico is a majority Catholic nation, and the government just turned anti-religious for whatever reason. I'm not an expert in Mexican history, so don't ask me. I just know that it happened. And for like 2 decades, the Catholic Church was outlawed, and priests would be killed, would be hunted down and killed. There were some uprisings that happened to try to overthrow the government to protect Catholics. But yeah, so that was not a communist regime. It's listed as authoritarian here. Authoritarian, it was a dictatorship, I think. One party was in complete power. So these are all this is in the last century. So it's not to, it's not to say like, okay, you have your group of dead people and we have our group of dead people. That's not the point I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to play death off of death. What I am trying to show is that Hitchens needs to be more careful when throwing around the idea that religion kills. Because where's your proof? If you look at the numbers, at least in the last 120 some years from these statistics, it was not religion that was doing the killing. And even if there was religion doing the killing before that, was religion doing killing at the same amount of numbers that apparently these communist countries were doing, in the tens and tens of millions? In later comments, Hitchens does try to address this claim. I don't think he does it successfully, because he basically tries to say that, well, for example, in Russia, because he couldn't deny the bodies, and he couldn't deny the grave sites, and the millions of grave sites, tens of millions in Russia, the former Soviet Union. So Hitchens tried to argue, he doesn't in his book, and he doesn't here with Anderson Cooper, but in other debates that I heard him do this, he would say, well, what really happened was the Soviet Union was kind of religious too, because they turned their leaders kind of like into gods. The people before them had been very religious people, so they had been kind of primed. The pump had been primed. People had already gotten that mindset of worship, seeing the Tsar, the leader of Russia, as kind of like the agent of God. And so the communists, the atheists, just came in and they transferred that allegiance from one god to another, to their god, which was no god. And so people just were still worshiping God, but they're really just, the state had become God for them. I'm not sure he's very successful with that, because he's like trying to blame people for their own deaths. Like, I think the communists were very clear that they hated religion, and that they wanted complete control. Definitely, you did follow the rule of the leader, but that was the whole problem, was that it was like a form of terrorism, that it became a reign of terror. Let's see. So for me, it seems like even in cases where religion isn't to blame, Hitchens makes religion always to blame, even when it's the recipient of violence. Religion isn't allowed to propagate. It's not allowed to intervene in human life. But what about economics? What about politics? What about when, or religion kills, but what about when economics kills or politics kills? I've talked about economics. I just talked about the communists, which was an economic political system in Russia and China. Or I talked about colonialism, which was a political enterprise. The British Empire. Why is that not to blame for killing so many people? Why is it just religion? I mean, he's a British guy, but he doesn't seem to want to lay any kind of blame at his Britishness, his country for being violent, for having killed millions or thousands or maybe millions of people through colonialism, through the British Empire, the British colonies. This is not to justify or rationalize religious violence, just to place it into context. So I'm not saying that violence is good. I'm not placing this pile of dead bodies against this pile. I'm just trying to place things in context, and let's say, well, let's take a step back here from the, yes, I know Hitchens has anger at religion, but let's step back here and say, is religion as bad as he's saying it is? He says that religion is not divinely sanctioned. It doesn't have approval from God to intervene in human life. And the problem he has is that religion can't, quote, keep itself to itself. I find that an interesting argument, because it seems like he's saying, let me go back to my PowerPoint here, just so I have it ready. It seems like he's saying, because I don't believe in what you're telling me to do, therefore you have no right to tell me what to do. And I'm not sure they're the same thing. Okay? Because, no, I mean, I guess none of us necessarily has a right to tell people what to do. Even parents, it seems like you try to tell your kids, you don't have any right to tell me what to do. I'll live my own life. At a certain point, you become an adult. And even your parents don't have that same kind of authority over you anymore. They don't have that right to tell you what to do anymore. But it seems like it's different with Hitchens. It's just like he doesn't believe in what religious people are telling him to do, so they have no right to say anything. And of course, I don't have a right to tell people what to think. It's a free country, as we say. You know? I don't have the right to tell people what they. I shouldn't say that. I do have free speech. So I do kind of have the right to tell people what I think they should think, but people also have a right not to listen to me. People have a right to challenge me and tell me I'm wrong. And they have the right to express their views contrary to mine. You're allowed to have your opinion too. Other people can have their opinion. They can agree or disagree. They can follow what I might say to do as a religious person, or they don't have to follow it. You know, I would have put it this way to Hitchens, that God is allowed to have his opinions too. You know, God is allowed to have an opinion. Just as much as I am. Just as much as Christopher Hitchens is. I worry when he says that it can't keep itself to itself, like religions don't have any right to have opinions about the world and the way it should be. Or if they do have opinions, they should just keep it to themselves. You keep your opinions to your churches, your synagogues, your mosques. Don't ever talk about them in the classroom, in politics. Don't talk about them anywhere. You keep them in those buildings and never talk about them outside. That seems to be his view. But, you know, if a religion has a viewpoint that people believe they have a command from their God to spread their teachings and to bring them into human society, isn't he showing a lack of respect to those religions? You might not agree with them. You might think they're wrong, that their God has not told them this, or that they shouldn't do it. But don't they have a certain human dignity that needs to be respected, that they're doing what they believe they're supposed to be doing? Now, I can tell them, you're wrong, and please don't talk to me about that because I don't believe in it and I think you're wrong. Or I can say, I don't think you should be talking about that in this situation. But to say you can't, I'm not sure I think I have a problem with that. And that goes not just for a religious view, but for any person's view. I mean, is Hitchens saying that no religion has a right to even have that belief, that they should propagate and push their views, that they should bring them to others and try to make other people believe in what they believe? Well, we do that all the time. I mean, people argue about stuff all the time. Politics, sports, music, what television shows people like to watch. I mean, yes, some of it's fluff and who cares? I mean, you're probably not going to get angry if someone roots for the Philadelphia Eagles and you're a Giants fan, or you're a Dallas Cowboys fan and people root for the Washington Redskins. Well, they're not the Redskins, excuse me. Sorry, it shows when I grew up. What are they, the Capitals now, or what are they calling themselves? The Navigators? Does anyone know what the Washington, D.C. football team is now? The name? No? That might be an extra credit point. I'd be interested. Huh? The Commanders? Are you sure? The Commanders? Prove it to me. Find it for me on your cell phone. Huh? How do you know? Your phone? Oh, it's on your laptop. Oh, okay. Let's see. So we got Mr. Diaz for telling me. Now, how did you know that, sir? Did you look it up on your laptop?
No, it's false.
I'm just trying to think this through. So when I was up here dying and asking, like, what's the name of the... Do you know the name of it? The name? You're just up here letting me die.
I was going to run it.
That's okay, sir. That's okay. It's fine. And Ms. Marquez confirmed it, and Ms. Link confirmed it too. Okay, here we go. Okay, so the Commanders. Anyways, so I mean, people are probably not going to, ruin a relationship, but people might do it over politics, abortion, gay rights, even the role of the government, whether the government should have a role in about everything, or if the government should be very limited. People might just be like, I just can't talk to my family about this. I can't talk to my sister. Just can't talk about those things because we get too angry. It gets too hot. So there might be some other things other than religion that people have opinions on. And does that mean that those things aren't allowed to intervene in your life? I mean, if we just had elections the other day, a couple days ago, and you're getting phone calls on the phone, people are leaving messages, politicians, you turn on the TV, I'm watching my Hulu, and there's another, political ad. Not now, but there will be in another couple of years when we have the federal election for president. But, it's like nonstop for like a month or so. And who are these people to send me stuff? Who are they to send me stuff in the mail, even to come knocking at my door, to try to hand a card out to me if I'm walking around in the grocery store, or if I'm out there? Who are they? What right do they have to do that to me? Especially if I don't agree with their views. If I think they're totally wrong. They shouldn't be allowed to be out there telling people that. I don't agree with that point of view. I might even think it's harmful. It just seems that Hitchens' view. I kind of already said that, so I've already said things, so now I don't have to say them again. I'm just trying to weed out the things so I don't have to say them again. I did point out that here is a man, and I already made this comment, so I guess I don't have to gild the lily, as they say, go over it again too much. But, I mean, just think of the context that Hitchens, who has published a whole book for others to read, he's appearing on a television show to promote his ideas, and then he criticizes another group, religious people, for not keeping themselves to themselves and leaving people alone. I mean, I see that as kind of contradictory. Shouldn't he just do the same? Why does Hitchens have a right to tell me what I should think about religion? Why? Because he thinks it's important. It's important to him. He thinks the stakes are high. If we go with his idea of Islamofascism, that you have these Muslims who are trying to violently take over the world so that everyone will have to follow Islam. I'm not saying I agree with that, but that's kind of what his view was. He thinks that the future of freedom for him, of the free Western world, is at stake. And he feels like he has to defend that. So I understand that. He thinks he's right. But if religion thinks the same thing, that like the eternal salvation of somebody is at stake, or absolute truth, then why can't religious people also argue for their views, even fight for them? Even fight for them, even do violence for them. Ooh. Ooh. Now I said something. Why can I say that in regards to Hitchens? Because he thought it was okay to do violence for his views. He thought it was okay. 2003, the United States invades the country, the sovereign state of Iraq, to impose its views. We thought they should have democracy. They didn't. So we sent in the troops. We sent in the bombs. We thought that they needed a more moderate Islam. So we were going to take it, change it into a democratic society with religious freedom. Notice, Iraq is not an Islamic state. In their constitution, we made sure you're going to have religious freedom. Now, of course, Islam is going to dominate because it's an Islamic country. But we imposed our views violently. And Hitchens agreed with it. He even supported it. He said, yes, we need to do this. We even need to do it to countries like Iran. Maybe Saudi Arabia. But Saudi Arabia is untouchable because, well, basically you'd have a world war because that's where the main sacred sites of Islam are. That was one of the reasons that the man Osama bin Laden, who kind of thought up the whole plot, the whole idea of punishing the United States by, flying planes into the World Trade Center and doing some kind of terrorist act like that. It was one of the reasons because at one point in time we had our armies there in Saudi Arabia, this country called Saudi Arabia, which is one of the holiest places for Muslims, and even women soldiers, which was a bigger, not a good thing. Anyways, but I'm going too deep into history that I don't want to get into. But if you're curious, you can ask me what I'm talking about. But anyways, so Saudi Arabia was off limits, the country of Saudi Arabia. But countries like Iran, Afghanistan, we went into Afghanistan, had nothing to do with September 11th. The Afghans had nothing to do with attacking us. They didn't attack us at all. But we wanted, again, this idea of promoting democracy and freedom so that you would moderate Islam, okay, not make it so violent, apparently violent, and you would have democracy. So you would keep, people would have, free countries, and they would have success, and the level of living would go up, and people would become richer and happier. And so the theory went that in these free democratic Islamic countries, you would have a much more moderate Islam. People would be less likely to want to kill themselves if, they would be more interested in when's the new iPhone coming out than, hey, can I strap a bomb to myself and go blow up a bunch of American soldiers or something. That was kind of the idea. Didn't actually work out that way. Actually made more enemies than maybe friends, unfortunately. So why can't religion do violence for its own views? If religious people really think they're right, and the stakes are really high enough, as they were for Hitchens, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, as the saying goes. If it's good for one goose, it's good for the whole group of geese. If Hitchens, they can do violence, then why can't we? Hitchens condemns religion for perpetuating ignorance. And this doesn't take long to really show that actually Hitchens is the one that's kind of ignorant here. his facts are all wrong, and it would take too long for me to go into all the mistakes that he makes about the various people he talks about, from this man he calls Aquinas to Augustine and stuff like that, because his whole argument really boils down to, well, and don't worry about these people, this man Augustine, we know him, remember, because when I talked about, at the very beginning of the course, I talked about what is religion, and I gave the quotation from Augustine. What is time, And Augustine died in, 430, I think? If I remember correctly, 430 CE? 430. And this man, Thomas Aquinas, as he's commonly known, for shorthand you can call him Aquinas, but Thomas Aquinas was 1274 is when he died. 1274. So there's quite a spread there from 430 to 1274. So he's throwing out people from completely different times and cultures. Augustine was African. He's from North Africa. Aquinas was Italian, from the middle of Italy, from Naples, two totally different people in their historical context. But they were ignorant. They didn't know about germ theory. They didn't know about germs. They thought the plague, and I don't know if there were any plagues during the time of Augustine in his lifetime. I'm not sure that there was the plague during the time of Aquinas. I'd have to check my facts on that. But okay, just go with it. There were plagues, and people like Augustine and Aquinas thought if they weren't started by the Jews, whatever that means, why he's bringing that one up, as some sort of conspiracy theory, then they thought it was a punishment from God. They gave it some religious explanation, And there might be some truth in that. They didn't know. They didn't know. They weren't scientists. No one knew how germs worked back then, either in the 5th century or in the 13th century. So guess what? I wouldn't expect either this man Augustine or Aquinas to know why people got the flu. If they even knew what the flu was. They just knew that people got sick. And so they, from their own understanding of the world, they tried to reason in their own way about why are people getting sick. And they could have thought, well, the water's poisoned. Or they could have thought, well, it's the devil. They could have thought that, yeah. And probably in some cases they probably did. They were not thinking that there are these little microbes all over our bodies and in our bodies that can cause disease and illness. They weren't thinking that way. Nor would I expect them to. So why should Hitchens expect that? Yeah, they didn't know about germs, but they also didn't know about black holes. And neither even Augustine, who was from Africa, ever saw Mount Kilimanjaro, which is the highest point in the continent of Africa. So why does it matter that they didn't know about germ theory? They didn't know about those things either. And a lot of people didn't know about them until very recently. If his whole argument is they were ignorant of how the world worked, like they thought that, the sun was stationary, the sun did not move, or rather the opposite. You're showing your own context after that the sun moved because they saw it move through the sky. First of all, that's highly rational. It's not correct. We know that. How we know that, I don't know, because I've never been out into space, but I believe what the astronomers tell me. But it's highly rational to think that the sun moves, because you see it every day. Well, unless it's cloudy, but you know what I mean. You see the sun moving through the sky. So it's perfectly rational to think that that's what's going on. Unless you get it's perfectly rational if you don't know mathematics and astronomy. And people did actually know that. People did actually know from mathematics and astronomical studies that, yeah, the sun actually appears to be moving, but it's actually we who are moving around the sun. Now, how that was happening also, people didn't have completely figured out. They thought we were all going around in a circle around the sun that was stationary. Okay, we now know it's not that. It's more of an ellipse. And actually, we don't go around in a perfect ellipse because sometimes we're closer to the sun and other times we're farther away. And so there are a lot of stuff they still didn't know. So are we not supposed to listen to those people who did know that the sun was not moving because they got everything else about it wrong? So what is his point? That people did not know things that they should not have known in the first place. And some of the people he mentions this man Spinoza. I don't know if he mentions Thomas Jefferson. I think he mentions Thomas Paine. But let's just look at this one person, Spinoza, because he mentions Spinoza a couple times. This man, Benedict Spinoza, who was a Dutch Jewish philosopher. So the Netherlands. Spinoza, and yes, I know I misspelled it, so we go back. I also did that. Spinoza was Dutch. So if we're curious where we're talking about, Dutch means he's from the Netherlands, and the Netherlands are up here in Europe, up here. Notice we're not allowed to call it either the Netherlands anymore. It's Netherlands, but it's the Netherlands. Right up here in Northern Europe. And our friend Benedict Spinoza, who was a philosopher, died in 1677 CE. And Hitchens brings him up, I think, at least twice in his talk with Anderson Cooper about, a person like Spinoza was not just a great rational thinker, but he was also a great man. Okay, fine. I'm not going to say he was not a rational thinker, and I'm not going to say Spinoza was not a great man. But why should I listen to him? Because let's see how Hitchens' hero fares in regards to knowing things he couldn't possibly have known. For example, let's start with germ theory, because that's what Hitchens uses in knowledge of the world. Well, we didn't know about germ theory until the 1850s. We didn't have a germ theory. People knew there were germs. People knew that things decayed and rotted, but they didn't know what was causing that. They didn't know that could also make you sick. That there were microbes in the food or in rotten food that would make you sick. If anything, people thought that God bless you, it was the fact of the rottenness, the rotting of the food that created these microbes, that created these little mold and stuff like that, which actually the mold is evidence of the microbes. It's the reverse. People didn't know that. Until the 1850s, we had this man, Louis Pasteur, who was a religious man, by the way. He was a devout Roman Catholic. Did experiments where he discovered that there were these things called germs, and that if you, for example, boiled liquids, you could kill off the germs, and then the liquids would become safe for drinking. And that's kind of how he extrapolated, well, there must be something that's there that we can't see. Again, notice, you couldn't see them. You couldn't see them with the microscopes they had at the time. You couldn't see them with the instrumentation. The fact that there were these small beings that you couldn't see and yet cause sickness, there are people who wouldn't believe that, because they couldn't see it with their eyes. They're like, if I can't see it through the microscope, how do you know it's there? Well, Pasteur did his experiments, and the only way they made sense was that there were these things that you couldn't see that could cause illness, could cause something to decay, rot, but could also cause illness. And so he kind of proved that by his experiments in the 1850s, or started to prove it. Prove that there was something there. Okay, there was something that was there, that was on things which could cause, in this case, could cause decay of food, but later also that there were things on the human body that could cause illness. Well, where did I put his name? Do I have it here? I'm sure I have it here, but I'm trying to think where it is. Did I get rid of it? Oh, shoot. Well, anyways, because when I'm talking about that there are germs that cause illness, there's a guy, I'm trying to remember his first name, and I thought I had it written down here in my notes, but I don't see it. So, but I know his last name. He was a Hungarian German named Semmelweis. I forget his first name. And he was a doctor, and he was working in the ward for pregnant women. And he noticed that, you had the doctors would deliver babies, but they also had midwives. They had women who were trained also to assist and to help deliver babies. And he noticed that the babies that were delivered by the doctors were dying, getting sick and dying at a higher rate than those that were delivered by the midwives. And he was puzzled by this. And what he figured out was, based on like germ theory, like Pasteur's work and stuff like that, that there were these little microbes that were all over us, on our hands, in decaying flesh and in decaying food. And that if you had them on your hands and didn't wash your hands properly, that when you're delivering a baby, there's a lot of blood and whatnot. So the microbes would get into the blood. They would make the mother sick. They would also make the baby sick, and they could kill the mother and the babies. Or I should say, killing the mothers. I'm sorry, scratch that. It wasn't the babies were dying. It was the mothers were dying the mothers were getting sick from infection. Excuse me. So reverse that. Babies were fine. So is that my phone already? All right. Well, let me finish this story, and then I'll end it. Let me tell you what happened. So what Semmelweis theorized, what he seemed to figure out was, what was the problem? Well, the problem was the doctors were treating sick people all day. And one of the worst things they were doing for the pregnant women was they would have to do autopsies on cadavers. So they had their hands and they were cutting up dead bodies to see why people died, and to also do, anatomical research. So, of course, they're dead bodies, so they're rotting. They're starting to rot. So there's all sorts of germs and bacteria and all sorts of nasty things. And they weren't washing their hands properly. I mean, they might wipe them off and maybe use water, but they weren't using stuff like alcohol. And that's where it clicked for Semmelweis. He thought, alcohol seems to be a purifier in some way. It seems to kill off germs if you use it. So what he started doing was he started having all the people who were attending the women in his ward, when they were delivering babies, they had to wash their hands in alcohol. And once they started doing that, ethyl alcohol, and you know this from COVID, yes? And once they started doing that, they noticed that the incidence of infection of the pregnant mothers getting sick and dying went way down, okay? He tried to convince his fellow doctors that he had proven something, he had shown something. They wouldn't believe him. He, at the time, was a doctor in Austria. He was a Hungarian German, so he was working in Austria at the time. And in fact, it's not just that they didn't believe him, he had to leave because the opposition to his practices were so great. He went back to Hungary, where again he started the same program. He said, if you're going to deliver babies, every time you're around people, after you've been around something rotten like a cadaver, as a doctor, wash your hands with ethyl alcohol and whatever. And it had the same results, so whatever. Now, my question is this. Here were scientists, rational men, because women were probably not admitted at the time, and yet here this guy was showing them, was proving it to them, and they wouldn't believe him. Why? Because they couldn't see the stuff in a microscope. They couldn't see it with their eyes. Just like someone can see the sun moving through the sky and think that it's moving. It's really moving. You're totally wrong. So I shouldn't listen to that person. I should have listened to those rationalist doctors who told Semmelweis he had Nothing? That you shouldn't wash your hands with ethyl alcohol because you can't prove that there are these little creatures that cause disease? Anyway, just a little parable there. So, okay, I'll talk. That's it for tonight. Good to see you all. I will see you next week. I almost got to the end. And maybe I'll cut that out. Well, done now. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. Have a good week. You too, sir. Thank you, Mr. Bank. Have a good week. Have a good week, Miss Celestine. Goodbye. Bye. Have a good week. Have a good week, Miss. Yes.
Are we here on Thanksgiving?
No, we're not. No, so we have a class next week, and the week after that, no class.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Do you want me to check just in case?
Yes, please, because I've been trying to, and I can't find any indication. Did you find any class or no?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Goodbye, Ms. Miller. Yeah, 17th we have class and nothing on the 26th. So there you go.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Have a good week.